In the silence of La Estancia farm, under the vast Uruguayan sky, Pepe Mujica felt life slowing down. His body was tired after almost 9 decades, his mind was still sharp, but with the acute awareness that time, that asset more valuable than money, was running out. Beside him, Lucia wove ancient stories while the wind blew gently through the trees. He looked far away, beyond the limits of his simple land, and his thoughts traveled. They traveled to a world that seemed increasingly thirsty for material goods and increasingly poor in spirit and sovereignty. He worried about the future of the people, especially those in the global south, who continued to struggle against the invisible chains of neocolonialism and oppression. He thought of the young people, of those who would inherit this turbulent world. Would they have the strength, the clarity, the stubbornness necessary not to give in? He remembered for a moment the Spartan office. The announcer's voice, deep and measured, announced the news that was spreading around the world: the departure of José Mujica, the former president of Uruguay. IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, the young captain who led Burkina Faso through its most turbulent times, stopped what he was doing. His pen rested on the maps and security reports that covered his makeshift desk in the barracks. That name. Mujica. He knew the figure, the poor president, the symbol of simplicity and rebellion against the system. Seen from afar, from the heart of the Sahel, he seemed almost like a character from another era, from another planet, a tale of a possible politics, but far removed from the harsh reality he lived. A twinge of something that was not personal sadness, they had never met, but a quiet respect, mixed perhaps with the lingering memories of his own youth, of the armed struggle, of the cold and lonely years in prison, of the brutal lesson about the value of freedom and dignity. This lesson, he felt, was the most important thing to convey. But how? Who would listen to the old ex-guerrilla, the philosopher-president, amid the noise of the world? Days before his departure, he called a longtime friend to the farm, a reserved man who had traveled across many continents, connecting people and ideas. An informal diplomat of solidarity, he knew the forgotten corners of the planet where the fight for dignity was still fierce. He handed him a small stone, polished by time and the river that cut through his land. It was smooth, heavy, modest. "Take this," Mujica said with a gleam in his tired eyes. "Take this to where the fight for sovereignty is most urgent now. To where the youth are rising up and facing giants. It is not advice in words. It is a reminder. A reminder that strength comes from the land, from simplicity, from not being afraid to be small in the face of the world, but giant in the defense of what is yours." The friend, whom we will call El Viajero, understood. He knew that it was not just a stone, but a symbol. The weight of the earth, the resilience of raw material, the modesty that resists the erosion of time. He knew where to go. The news that arrived from Africa, from Burkina Faso, spoke of a young military leader, IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, who dared to challenge the old orders, who slept in the barracks with his soldiers and spoke directly to his people about sovereignty and dignity. A military man, yes, in a context of war and coup, so different from the relative peace of Uruguay, but whose speech and gestures seemed strangely to echo Mujica's refusal to conform. El Viajero's journey was long and full of uncertainties. From the tranquil air of the American South to the tense effervescence of Ouagadougou. He navigated bureaucracy, suspicions, and the constant threat that hung in the air. It took weeks until he finally managed to get an audience at the military complex where Traoré lived and worked, amid the rush of war preparations and security meetings. The room was Spartan. Operations maps covered the walls. Tense young soldiers moved about. IBRAHIM TRAORÉ, in uniform as always, looked even younger up close, his eyes tired but determined, his posture erect. There was no luxury, only the urgency of duty and struggle. El Viajero was introduced as a visitor from afar, a feeling that the world was losing a necessary voice that crossed his mind. Another lighthouse was going out. 2 days later, amid the frenetic routine of a nation at war, unusual news reached his ears. A woman, plain-looking but with eyes that showed she had seen much, had come from far away and was requesting an urgent and confidential meeting. She said she was bringing something important, something that couldn't wait. The security guard hesitated, but something about the woman's insistence and the mystery surrounding her intrigued him. He agreed to meet her late at night in a discreet room at headquarters. She introduced herself as Elena. She did not give any fancy surnames. She spoke, in a few words, about a long-standing friendship with José Mojica, forged in times of struggle and hope. She explained that, in the last months of his life, even though he was weakened, Mojica spent hours reflecting. Not about the glorious past, but about the future of the world, especially the global south, about the new struggles for sovereignty and dignity that he saw emerging. He read, listened, asked questions. And he thought. Elena pulled a small object from a worn bag, a simple, old digital recorder. Pepe knew the end was coming, she said, her voice breaking. He asked me to take this to someone when he left, someone he could see, even from afar, fighting a similar battle. Someone who needed to hear, not direct advice, but the echo of an experience. He mentioned your name, Captain TRAORÉ. He said he saw in you the same spark of rebellion for the right cause. TRAORÉ felt a shiver. Did the wise old man from the south know his name? Did he see something in him? He picked up the recorder, pondering the symbolic weight of this simple device coming from the hands of a man who had so rejected technology and material possessions. The room fell into a tense silence as he pressed play. Mojica's voice, husky and familiar from the videos that circulated the internet, filled the space. There was no formality. It sounded more like an interior monologue, captured on audio. Life, oh, life is stubbornness, a succession of falls and rises. I spent many years in the well, Captain. Alone. With the ants. There I learned the value of time. And the danger of losing oneself in the darkness. The external struggle is vital, yes, it is for the freedom of someone with an important message from an old man who thinks. TRAORÉ, with a nod, indicated that he should continue, his patience limited by the mountain of tasks before him. Captain TRAORÉ, El Viajero began, his calm voice contrasting with the surroundings. I come from a distant place, at the request of a man who dedicated his life to the fight for human dignity and the sovereignty of peoples. A man who, even in his last days, thought about the future of the global south and those who today carry on this fight. I come at the request of José Mojica. The name seemed to hang in the air for a moment. A slight surprise crossed TRAORÉ's face. Mujica. He knew who he was. The poorest president, the global symbol of a different kind of politics. A world away from his reality of trenches and jihadist threats. Did he send a message? TRAORÉ asked, curiosity momentarily overcoming his haste. He sent this, said El Viajero, reaching out and placing the small polished stone on the ground. He sent this to the people, for the land, for the bread. But the internal struggle, that's for the soul. To not become what you fight against. To not let hatred corrode hope. TRAORÉ listened, motionless. Mojica's words, spoken in another context, in another life, seemed strangely current. The loneliness of power, the pressure, the risk of becoming too hardened to survive. Power, Captain, is a dangerous tool. It seduces. It deceives. It takes you away from the ground, from the people you claim to fight for. They will offer you palaces, shiny cars, empty laurels. It is the trap. True strength is not in what you accumulate, but in how light you remain. In how much you remain one with your people. Always remember where you came from. And who you are there for. Luxury is not the reward, it is the prison. The captain thought about his constant uniform, about his refusal to use an armored car. These were not just political gestures for him. They were, on the improvised table between maps and radios, and he asked me to say that this stone represents the land from which we come, the resilience that shapes us and the humility that should guide strength. He said that in the most difficult moments, when pressure from outside and inside tries to make you deviate, hold on to it. Remember where you come from, who you fight for, in fact, and attempt to stay on the ground, to not be swallowed up by the symbols of power that he despised in his predecessors. The old Mojica, without knowing it, seemed to validate this deep intuition. And sovereignty is not just raising the flag. It is having the courage to say no. To choose your own path, even if the world pressures you. It is understanding that no one from the outside is going to solve your problems, Captain. And that true strength lies in not losing your soul, in serving your people with unwavering integrity, no matter the cost. Traoré picked up the stone. He felt its unexpected weight, the surface. No one will fight for their land with the same passion as you and your people. But in this fight, be careful with the shortcuts that cost you humanity. War leaves scars on the earth, but also on the souls of those who fight it. He looked at her, then at El Viajero. The message was not about military tactics or economics, but about principles. About the essence of leadership in times of trial. Mujica's voice coughed, paused for a long time. The sound of tired breathing filled the silence. Then, lower, almost a whisper. Asterisk, in the end, action. Old Mujica, from his quiet farm, sending a symbol of ethical resistance into the heart of the African storm. There were no grandiloquent words in the farewell. A firm handshake. El Viajero felt that his mission was accomplished. He left Traoré with the stone in his hand, his eyes fixed on it for a moment before turning his urgent attention to the maps and the immense challenges of governing a country at war. What remains are not the battles won or lost on the field. It is whether you were able to look back and see that, despite everything, you remained faithful to that initial spark, to the hope of building something. El Viajero left Burkina Faso knowing that he had not transmitted advice in the practical sense, but rather the essence of a legacy. The belief that, even in the most brutal contexts, the fight for sovereignty is better. Who did not become a monster to kill another? That dignity, Captain, the dignity of your people and your own, that is the only wealth worth defending to the end. Asterisk. Grania and dignity require a foundation of integrity, humility, and a deep connection to the land and the people. Mujica's stone, carried across oceans and realities, now rested on a table in Uvakeo finished. Silence returned to the room, heavier now, loaded with the echo of that voice that had just fallen silent forever in the world. Traoré felt the weight of the tape recorder in his hand. Agadugu, a silent and heavy reminder that the flame of resistance has many forms and can light up in the most unexpected places, connecting the wise old man who left with the young captain who dared. It wasn't advice, as Elena had said. They were reflections. Revelations of a man who had been through hell and back, who had touched power and not let it corrode him, who had fought for sovereignty and for defying the world. The story of their connection would not be written in the official books, but perhaps, just perhaps, it would be engraved in the heart of stone and in the spirit of those who fight for a world where human dignity is the only true currency of value. Dignity for decades. They were words distilled from a life, offered as a beacon to another man, in another time, in another fight. He looked at Elena, his eyes meeting her silent understanding. He saw the fight, Traoré said, more to himself than to her. He understood that the battle is the same, even if the weapons and the setting change. Elena nodded. Pepe believed that the spirit of resistance does not die. It moves. It finds new hearts, new hands. In places we least expect it. Traoré spent the rest of the night keeping vigil. Not sleeping on the floor of the barracks, as usual, but sitting, staring out the window, Mujica's words echoing in his mind. The urgency of the war, the external pressure, the misery of the people, it was all still there. But now, there was a new layer. An unexpected depth. Mujica's legacy was not an instruction manual for a military leader in Burkina Faso. It was a mirror. A constant reminder of what really matters in the struggle for the people, sovereignty. Traoré ran his fingers over the cool, polished surface of the stone. Its weight was comforting, solid, real, different from the volatility of war and politics. The recorder, now silent, seemed like a magical artifact that had brought back an echo from another time, another kind of struggle. Mujica's words offered no military solutions to the jihadist threat, no economic plans to lift Burkina Faso out of poverty. They were deeper, more urgent to the soul, the danger of becoming what one fights, the trap of power and luxury, the importance of maintaining dignity and connection with one's people. That night, lying on his bunk in the barracks, with the tape recorder and the stone on a box beside him, Traoré felt the weight of his own responsibility in a different way. He did not seek power for its own sake, his revolt was genuine against the inaction and corruption that were undermining his country. But MUJICA, with the wisdom forged by years of extreme deprivation, warned of more subtle temptations, the gradual loss of self and the maelstrom of leadership, the detachment from the reality of the people, the ethical corrosion that power can cause. The stone became his silent companion. In tense meetings with generals, in grueling dispatches, in moments of overwhelming doubt about the future of his nation, Traoré would sometimes hold it in his pocket, feeling its solidity. It was an anchorage. A tactile reminder of the earth, of humility, of the quiet stubbornness and resisting erosion, not just from the external enemy, but from one's own soul. There was the day when a powerful foreign delegation from a country that had previously explored Africa sat down in front of him with tempting proposals, but full of conditions that reeked of dependence and the surrender of resources. The pressure was immense, disguised as aid and partnership. For a moment, Traoré felt tired and tempted to accept the seemingly easier path, to free himself from part of the burden in exchange for old commitments. His more pragmatic advisors argued that it was the only way out. But then, in the midst of the tense conversation, his hand touched the stone in his pocket. He felt the polite coldness, remembered MUJICA's hoarse voice. Sovereignty is having the courage to say no. To choose your own path. No one from outside is going to solve your problems. You didn't become a monster to kill another. He looked at the foreign representatives, their polite faces and calculated smiles. And the answer came, firm, inspired not only by military or economic necessity, but by an echo of dignity that resonated from the words of an old sage on the other side of the world. He refused the terms, insisted on self-determination for Burkina Faso, shocked the delegation with his frankness and his intransigence in defending the interests of his people. It was a moment of risk, but also of liberation. Other times, the temptation was internal. Allegations of corruption at lower levels, the need to make tough decisions that would affect innocent lives in the name of security, the danger of becoming isolated in one's position, of losing touch with reality on the ground. At such moments, Traoré would listen to excerpts of MUJICA's recording again. The reflections on prison reminded him of the value of sanity and humanity under pressure. The warning about power urged him to keep it simple, to listen to dissenting voices, to never forget who he was fighting for, not some abstract concept of nation or power, but the real people, those who slept under the threat of terrorism, who struggled to feed their families. MUJICA's last piece of advice was not a map, but a moral compass. In a world that demanded brute force, quick decisions, and an implacable stance from Traoré, MUJICA's legacy whispered the importance of humanity, ethics, and the quiet stubbornness of maintaining one's soul. It did not transform the captain into a pacifist, nor did it eliminate violence from his reality. But it injected an unexpected element into his leadership, a layer of ethical reflection, an anchor of humility, and a constant reminder that true victory is not just about expelling the enemy, but about building a society where dignity is possible for all, without losing oneself in the process. Thus, the spirit of the old wise man from Uruguay found an unlikely path for the young captain from Burkina Faso. MUJICA's legacy, encapsulated in a stone and an engraving, did not die. He traveled, he adapted, he found a new heart where the flame of resistance needed to be lit, proving that the struggle for sovereignty and dignity is a current that crosses generations and continents, uniting unlikely leaders under the same vast sky, in the same stubborn hope for a better world.